remember the first piece of clothing that you really connected with?
Yeah, I do. I think it would have to be, my sister, when I was maybe 15 or 14, she bought me a Christmas present from a local vintage store. And she's not particularly interested in design or clothing or anything. So it was really kind of crazy that she bought me a gift from this shop. Because I think I was in that era when I'm 31 now, but this is when I was probably, 14, 15. And she bought me this old Jag, super oversized, heavy knit, red, really like fire engine red cardigan. And I've kept that with me forever until a few years ago, I washed it badly and it shrunk. And so actually that piece of clothing I tried to recreate in a collection a few years ago and have these sort of really heavy, thick, oversized cardigans. I think it must have been like from the 80s or something. It even had removable shoulder pads attached with Velcro to a knit cardigan. It was just sort of absurd. That's probably one of the first pieces I've been very emotionally connected to in my life. Yeah, definitely.
Was there a reason that she picked out that piece for you?
I don't know. And I think half the reason why that present was so left of field was that it felt like, it just didn't feel like that would be something she would even sort of notice or a store that she would even go into. And I don't even think she probably even knew how interested I was becoming in clothing or in vintage shopping or anything at that time. So I guess as the years went on, it felt, it felt kind of special that she picked that out for me. And then I really loved it.
Was vintage shopping your first foray into fashion, you would say?
Yeah, I think so. No, that's a lie. I think before vintage shopping, I was always watching fashion TV as a kid on like cable television. I would watch that just for hours and hours and hours and watch runway shows and backstage interviews and like, I think it was called The Style Files or Fashion File with Tim Blanks. All of these type of early 2000s TV culture around fashion is, I think, where I first found it really interesting. And then, vintage shopping was a natural progression just because that's what you can afford, I suppose, when you're a teenager and going into charity shops and whatever and finding weird things to, make yourself feel different.
Right. And this would have been when you were growing up in Australia, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm Sydney. I grew up in Sydney and was there until the age of 19, more or less. And then since then, my whole sort of education and experience in fashion has been over in Europe.
What was the feeling like in terms of growing up in Australia and, I guess also the fashion aspect of it? I mean, when did you, other than seeing it on TV, what did you notice about Australia?
I think Australia had, when I was younger, had some really exciting brands that were sort of starting. There was these sort of big brands that still exist to this day. There were they're very commercial now and they're huge businesses, but you had like Zimmermann and Camilla and Mark and Scanlan and Theodore. And these were like beautiful boutiques in nice areas of Sydney. But there was a brand called, I don't know, it still exists, but it's by no means connected to what it used to be, called Subi, Subi jeans. It used to be spelt with a T when I first knew it. And now it's with a K because they were sued by a German shoe brand called Subo. Anyways, they, I think, were a brand like them. They were doing, I guess 2006, 2005. I think they did this runway show where they released like 1,000 rats down the runway. And it was just like distressed jeans and like t-shirts, but really, really, really epic styling, and felt really new, and it felt really cool. And I remember saving up. That's actually probably the second garment, is that I saved up for months and months and months, and put a pair of jeans on lay-by. These like very drop crotch jeans. And I still have them to this day. And they have this really cool embroidery on the back, like two crosses in a square. And that was just the height of coolness for me when I was growing up. I thought that was amazing. And brands like Romance was born. I guess when I was a bit older, I guess Dion Lee started, and he had this huge entrance into the industry. And I think Australia was really exciting. And I think it's lost that, to be perfectly honest. I think it's become, where are you from? LA, is that correct?
Seattle originally.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've been in LA for 10 years nearly.
Okay, right. Well, I don't know LA, but these sort of like, I guess maybe the temperature has something to do with it, but there's this Australia, Sydney culture of, it's just very kind of resort weary and kind of washed linens, and it's all become quite Zara-fied, I think, style there in general. And the industry doesn't invest so much in like young or like I guess more difficult concepts of fashion. I think it used to. I really felt like there was an energy before, and the further I've gotten away from that, it feels like it's changed a bit. But anyways.
Yeah, I'm always curious about how, the places that we're from connect to our story and our work. And it was interesting looking at your work through the lens of Australia, because it seems that there's a sense of, you said resort wear. Maybe that's not how I would have said it if you didn't say that. But there is an easiness like about beach wear or resort wear that I see in your work. Did you originally make that connection?
Yeah, I don't think I did consciously, but one of my tutors when I was studying in London definitely made that connection more than a few times with my work. So I guess when you sort of something becomes, maybe somebody else notices something, and if it makes sense to you, you start to see it. So yeah, that has become, I think, one of the building blocks of what the brand sort of represents, maybe. I think more so in the earlier collections than now, but even then it peeks through. I often favor that silhouette, something that feels like it could be held together with one button and it's sort of just going to fly off you. Yeah, there is that for sure. And also the textures of things. I think the lightness, my master's collection was really just a giant study in lightness and using the lightest fabrics I could find and washing them. It was actually about holidays. It was about this like ritualistic idea of packing for a holiday, but it's the same holiday every year. You go to the same place, you eat the same food, you stay in the same room, sort of like an all-inclusive resort kind of culture. And the clothes were really about that, just the idea of a shirt that's been packed and ironed and washed and vacuum packed and over and over and over and over and over and over again, that it starts to become this like, I guess, charged symbol of your 2 weeks away every year. So yeah, I think I what you've said is exactly right. And that has been brought to my attention before. And I think that set me on a discussion with myself about what that whole world of like resort wear is.
Yeah. And what's interesting about what you just said about this place that you go to often, even if it's for 2 weeks, there's a sense of home that we feel, even when it is something that's a vacation. I know for me, because I grew up in the Northwest and is very much like London, gray and rainy.
Yeah.
But my parents had some friends that had a condo in Arizona, which is mostly desert, and that was kind of the place we grew up going for vacation, because it was, I think for my parents, it was like a cheap vacation, and all we cared about was having a pool. You know what I mean? But I ended up going to Arizona later for university, and I'm sure that's because Arizona felt like a place that was home, even though I only went there, maybe once a year for like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. I think places and states of mind of those places like are extremely powerful. I mean, that was that something that you did every year? Was the holiday place, was it repetitive, or was it just a couple of years in your life? Or
we did it pretty often. I mean, probably from maybe ages of like 7 to like 16 or 17. So we would at least go for, sometimes it was, 3 days over like maybe it was like a holiday weekend, if we had Monday off from school. But those places become so important to you. And it's interesting looking at your work and the themes of your work, how much home is something that you're dissecting.
Yeah, I think that's something. I've never even thought about it that way, actually. Home, the idea of home. I do like that, though. I think it's in that process of, as I mentioned before, this washing and like the fraying or the kind of unpicking of garments. I mean, there's a lot of the work, a lot of the kind of more, I guess, iconic to the brand is sort of this sort of like collaged fabrics that we then cut back into and cut away at. So yeah, I've been interested in that, just aesthetically, as well as just the process of doing that and the idea of layers sort of peeling away over time, and how to create that in something that feels, really handled or touched or, like it's gone through multiple phases or something. I think, which I don't think is dissimilar from your work, having looked at it. I think you've got a real sensibility for that as well, no? I mean, this handled feeling of things, where there's a lot of like emotion charged in that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love the idea of imperfectness, which I think you connect with as well.
Massively. Yeah. And I do. I love that. I think it's the most exciting thing, and I think it's luxurious at the end of the day. Imperfection.
And if you think about this conversation, what makes you and I unique is our story, right? And so I've always thought that, pieces that have been through something, that's really what adds the story, as opposed to having something that's absolutely made perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it's a balance. I find, like, just to speak like very, I guess, I don't know, practically about a brand. I find that now as our collection grows, you start to think about building it out. You think about range plans. You're thinking about because we are predominantly, we're 100% a wholesale business. We have just started selling online a very small amount of things, but we work, with retailers. So you start to sort of feel about, okay, how do you build this wardrobe out, or how do you build the collection out to offer more ways to sort of enter into it. I'm looking at a rail right now, and there's this like very perfect blazer on it, and it feels weird. It feels really weird, and it always feels. But I'm getting excited by that as well. I don't think I'll ever lose the undoneness of things, or or the sensitivity to imperfection. But I'm finding interesting now the contrast of that, and then how is that evolving, and how is that conversation evolving into actually really craving to make like a beautiful, fully tailored, canvassed, lined jacket, and
Right.
and have no rawness to it at all. But how can we transmit that feeling, in another way without just relying on a frayed seam or like an unfinished hem. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a weird like evolution I think we're going through, but I think you just got to try things, really, don't you? And figure it out as you go. But
yeah, and that paradox is what I think is really interesting. I think if you were just, working on things that were really destroyed, you could lose some of the story in that in a way. I mean,
well, I think it just limits you. I think it just can limit, as a creative, you can become feeling limited. I think brands nowadays were really, I don't know how you feel, but this is how I sometimes feel, that you're kind of told to like find a signature, and you just really have to stick with it and stick with it and stick with it and stick with it. But we're not, I mean, I guess we're designers at the end of the day, and like it's just human nature to get bored of things or or become curious about something else. So I feel like you have to allow yourself, it's difficult to, I find it difficult myself to allow myself the space to push things or feel like I have license or space to move pieces or ideas into realms that don't feel necessarily my own. It's sort of like, what's the threshold for something being yours, and how many times do you have to do it until it is yours? Do you know what I mean? It's like this sort of, I don't know if you're ever in showrooms and find yourself having really redundant conversations with people about, oh, this feels very this brand, and this feels very this brand, or people love to sort of create connections, I think, for their own thought process. And I'm thinking, yeah, I guess it makes sense, but I can find it quite exhausting, because then you're like, but are you saying that it's not mine, or are you saying that it is mine but it's connected to this? Or I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it's something that I find interesting as a small micro brand trying to create a fully fledged offering twice a year.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I found the same thing to be true as well. I think it's part of human nature maybe to make connections between things we already know to form a new connection, and just that if you're trying to explain Tesla to somebody, you probably would say like, well, it's the Mercedes of electric cars,
right?
Or something. And for people, it's like, oh, okay, I can understand what that means, even if I've never seen this car, right? But
yeah.
But when you are working on something and you're putting your life into something, it can maybe feel a bit discouraging, right? Because you are trying to blaze your own path.
Totally. And I think you can feel limited. You can feel, well, I'm a trained designer, or you have a small team of other creative people. So there's a lot of ideas being formed throughout the process. And I don't want it to feel ever that we're just in this safe, rolling, repetitive thing. If things need to evolve. So, and it always feels like a catch-22. I mean, I don't want to go into complaining territory. But it's sort of this idea of like, you kind of get these conflicting comments from a lot of the industry of like, be consistent, but where's the newness? But be consistent, stay in your lane, but where's the newness? Where's the evolution? But be consistent, because you really need to be consistent. And you're like, whoa. Okay, I'm just going to have to turn the noise down a little bit and just do what feels right at the end of the day. And if there's a reaction, there's a reaction. And if there's not, well, then you always have another season, I suppose.
Yeah. It's interesting we're talking about consistency, though, because looking at your work, I feel like, you have been very consistent from even your master's collection, which I don't think, at least in my experience, is normal. I mean, I feel like I've seen most master's collections kind of be maybe something a bit more conceptual for people. And then as they move into, producing their collection, they can't send, or they can't sell like an extremely bulbous, whatever it is that they were trying in school. But you've remained incredibly consistent from your first collection, in my view.
I think the master's collection, I mean, I had a BA collection. I won't show you where to find that because I wouldn't want to look at it anymore. But I think that was a different, I mean, I think I've always been interested in clothing. And I've never not to say I don't think conceptually but I've always been interested in really seeing the piece and having it look like it's going to be worn. And I think my master's, I'd done a BA, and I guess you could say that collection was a little bit more extreme in its proportions. It's very typical, this idea of a graduate collection and having to be the biggest explosion of your creativity ever. Then I went away and worked. And then I went and did my master's. And the master's, I think I was in such an incredible class. I was in Paola's class, for example. And a lot of other really, really talented designers who had very strong visual identities. And St. Martin's, the school, is just sort of known for that. So whether through protest or through natural oversaturation or something, I think I made a very conscious decision to work on things that felt very subdued, very quiet, and really challenge myself to look at, like I'd mentioned, sort of sensitivity or a certain sensitivity in menswear, with very simple notions of using linings instead of wools, or using muslin instead of shirting cottons, or washing things. And so it almost, it almost felt like I really could only build on top of that, because it was such a, if you put it in the context of what like a CSM graduation collection looks like, I think it was really quiet, almost invisible. So I felt like, well, I've just set myself up for this sort of, I can really just add to this and build on this. And there are nuanced ideas, I think, that come out through that work that have been built on years after. But it's nice of you to say that you think it's consistent or coherent or whatever. That's nice to hear. I mean, I like that. I like the idea of consistency. But
I do as well.
But yeah.
But it must have. Do you think having that break from your BA going to CSM, do you think that's what allowed your mind to kind of come back to a more, I hate to say realistic, because...
No, but it's true, right? I think it's true.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, it definitely...
Taking that break from school kind of allowed you to go into real life and work, and it almost kind of morphed into what you showed during your MA collection.
Yeah, I think so. I think it did. I think that year out was really important for me. I think it put my feet on the ground. It put me working as a designer for a massive company, doing very normal clothes, and experiencing the industry in a complete other extreme. So having that, it would be foolish for that to say that hadn't influenced the way I went into studying an MA. I think it was that, and I think it was like, well, listen, after having made, I don't know how many shirts during that year working, or how many pairs of trousers that felt so unspecial and so uninspired or whatever. It just felt nice to then look at the same building block of a wardrobe, but try and imbue that with something that felt special, whether that's using a fabric that I would never have been able to use at the brand I worked at, doing a wash process that they would never, it just wouldn't work. It almost felt like you wouldn't be able to put that on a shop floor, even though it's just a shirt made out of gauze or cotton muslin and then washed at 100 degrees or whatever. So that felt kind of like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting to me, and that's kind of luxurious to me in a way that studying is such a luxury. Doing postgraduate degree is such a luxury. So I think I really just tried to take advantage of those 2 years, and make things that felt true to me. And when I started, every time I would direct my work in a more conceptually, I guess, like obviously conceptual way, okay, but now I'm going to, stick a chair on this person on their head, and like, it just felt contrived and it didn't feel honest. And I was told that many times until it eventually sunk in. And I believed it too. It didn't feel right. So what felt right was that approach for me.
Right. Were your parents supportive of your fashion journey originally?
Oh yeah, they were. They've been really supportive. I mean, I wanted to be an actor or a fashion designer. So I think out of those two, they were happy I picked something that had sort of like what's the word? I get like a trade attached to it. You have a set of skills, I suppose, that are less abstract than performing. They're more, not that actors don't have skills, but it felt like, okay, well, if I'm going to come out of this studying and I'm going to know how to draft a pattern or stitch a shirt or use a program, and you learn so much. Did you study fashion? Like, did you do a fashion degree? Did you come from like a design degree, or did you come from something else?
No, I went to business school.
Wow.
I didn't have any fashion people in my family. So it was something I kind of discovered on my own, by like watching Lil Wayne and like Pharrell. And
wow.
And I mean, part of my story is really about dissecting the uniform in a way, because I went to a private school and we had to wear certain colors, we had to wear certain types of pants. But I was always trying to push the limits of that uniform. I would like wear, Pharrell release his ice cream brand. And, he had, at one point there was like, he was releasing like pink uppers with like a, like yellow sole with like green laces, and like this whole thing. And so like I would come to school, wearing like my ice cream shoes, because the shoes were not part of, the uniform that you had to wear. Or I would wear like 2 polos at a time, or I would, I was kind of always, or I was trying to push the colorways too, gray was not allowed, but white is, but I would like try to show up in like a oatmeal or something because so it's interesting how those early experiences really kind of dictate the path you take, even when it doesn't seem connected.
No. That's interesting. So you went to university and studied business. Well, that sounds like a much smarter choice to then go off and start your brand with. I'm sure most of us wish we'd done that now.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes I wish I would have went to fashion school. Not so much now, but when I was starting IRAE, I actually went to London, and I was like, I have to go to St. Martin's. So I went and walked around the school, and I was like, man, I should have went here. I should have. I felt the energy of the students and that like area around the school, and I felt like a true outsider actually, because and in your low moments, you're like, this is where something is really happening, and I wasn't able to be a part of it.
I think I understand that, but I think there's little versions of that everywhere. I mean, St. Martin's is a special place, and even I didn't do my whole studies there. It was just postgrad. So even going as a postgrad student felt like you'd missed 4 years of something else, And a lot of the people, like Paula or many others on our course, which by the time you're on MA is very reduced. It's only like 30, 40 people. A lot of them, like a large majority of them, had been there all together on undergraduate studies. So you kind of all those of us who came in for MA were kind of like, whoa, like trying to catch up with this language or like with a certain. So even in my 2 years there, I think I probably spent the better part of the first half of that feeling probably quite similar to what you've just described, actually.
Yeah, and you were probably coming into like people that already had their friend groups, and
exactly.
Yeah, it kind of like throws you back into like a early education experience when you're like trying to make friends and
100%, and yeah, it was a lot, but I mean, it was amazing. Don't get me wrong, and like it wasn't. I don't think I ever felt excluded from anything, but you're just battling with your own. It was just like an overload of input of stuff and ways of talking, ways of thinking, the way the tutors work, the way that the critique works, the way that the politics, it's such a school that's so full of external, a lot of external help from like the luxury industry, a lot of, scholarships, a lot of opportunities, a lot of very important people coming and looking at your work. And that was quite alarming at the beginning. And then you just sort of get over it and realize that you're just in another simulation of reality, like all of these schools and institutions and things can feel like, especially in the creative world. But anyways.
Yeah. And I think the important part is that you go outside your comfort zone. So for me, even though I didn't go to an art school, it was, originally moving from this place that I grew up and spent 18 years of my life to a different state, going to Arizona. But then after that, it was going to Los Angeles, and I think that step is really what's important, whether it is for a school program or it's just to go and start working somewhere. That step of faith that you take, and that it's really a belief in yourself and giving yourself a shot to follow a dream, right?
Totally.
What was your experience at CSM? And when you look back at it, was there a lesson? I'm sure there's many, but is there something that you really took away from that experience?
Yeah, I took a lot away. My biggest, I think, looking back on CSM, I think I was a worse student there than I was at undergraduate level. Funnily enough, I think my undergrad years, I was really was successful in projects and had good grades and was a hard worker. I think I was a hard worker at CSM, but it was in a different way. I think that the way that you were evaluated was different. And I think I got completely dismantled on that course. I became just this blob, this sludgy ball of someone who couldn't actually even put pen to paper or do anything at some points, because it's just really psychologically, it's aggressive. And it's really, you're not you really have to kind of, I think, I don't know, I can't speak to how all art schools are, but at least where I did my undergraduate, it felt like it was so formulaic, the way that I would achieve or succeed in a project. It felt like there was a lot of boxes to be ticked. And it just, a lot of the work could just end up being quite formulaic. Just do this, do that, good text sheet, good pattern, interesting concepts, some okay research, execution, and you'll be fine. Whereas the master's degree felt I think we had our first project was just called research, and it was 6 months of research with no brief. And that was mind-blowing. And I didn't know, but what do I have to do? What do I need to do? So I just had to recalibrate my brain. And I think the way that tutors would give you feedback would often feel very, very targeted and very personal, and not in a bad way or a vicious way, just in a, you just spend a lot of the time questioning yourself, which is why I say it's such a luxury, because to give yourself that kind of time, I mean, you run a business, you understand we barely have time to design even. I mean, at least in my case, to everything else that goes with making a piece of clothing and actually making it available for people to buy is crazy. So yeah, I think the one thing I took away, which is so cheesy and lame, but I think you just really discover the essence of what you have to say, whether that's exciting or whether that's disappointing or whether that's whatever that may be. You come out, I think, and I think a lot of my colleagues would agree, you come out with an ability to critique yourself very quickly and very deeply all the time, constantly, but never stop, but also fight through that and don't let it paralyze you to stop making something. That's what I think I came out with. I think I came out with a much higher understanding of critique, and of self-evaluation, because a lot of the time you're just left with big gaps of silence in a room with 6 teachers. So you're kind of just filling in those gaps yourself. There wasn't a lot of positive reinforcement there. You're not being told you're amazing, even if you are, or you've done something absolutely insane. You're never really getting that positive reinforcement. So I think you just have to learn how to give it to yourself in some way.
Yeah. Did that lack of positive reinforcement, did that weigh on a lot of the designers? I mean, in a way, does that kind of weed out some of the people that are a part of the program?
I don't know. I think it weeds. I think they do a very good job of weeding, of curating the course from the beginning. I mean, you've got people on that course who've never stitched a garment in their lives, who have come from art or have come from something else. I think they're really good at coming together, bringing together a group of people that they think will create an interesting mix in each individual's practice, whether that's aesthetically or personality or whatever. So yes, I think it puts a lot of people to the test, including myself at a very early stage. This idea of, you're not going to be given a gold star every time you make something happen. That's not what this is about. And yeah, you just have to kind of grow up and realize that you've got to be you have to be your biggest advocate, I suppose, because, we're not going to cradle you through this, because as we all learn, eventually the industry is a really, really messed up place. It's really hard, and it's really unfair, and there's no consistency or formula to making that work. You just kind of have to be flexible to get through, I suppose, and find a way to feel happy in your work, because you can get very lost, I think, if you start relying purely on external validation and on people giving you a gold star for everything. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense or answers your question, but
yeah,
that's.
I mean, we learn, right, that once we're into it, I mean, the positive reinforcement is few and far between. Once you've started your business, and so it is really self-reliant on the belief in yourself, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you can if you can convince yourself that what you've done is valid, and I think it's quite easy to convince other people, or for them to feel that way too, as long as it's genuine. For them to understand what you're saying, and however profound or not profound that is, I think is the key.
What do you think the importance is in having designers around you and kind of being in contact with other designers?
Oh, I think it's the most important thing. for me anyway, I think it's incredibly important. I think we digest so much of this industry online now that you just you can just like oversimplify things and just think, okay, there's like a really straight line between where one person or a group of people have arrived at, and it's just A to B, and it's very clear. You think you know everyone's story through just a few examples or a few articles or the press or whatever. So for me, I'm so grateful that I came from a class of a lot of people who started their own brands. And we all talk really, regularly, and share information and share problems, and can sort of confide in each other about how difficult things can be sometimes, but also taking a bit of the weight off it as well, and just being like, well, actually, let's just get a bit of perspective. Like, the world is not, this is not the end of the world. Let's just try and have a laugh about it, or I don't know. I think for me, it's so important to speak with people who understand your language, however esoteric that might be, or however just basic that is, in the sense of, dealing with a supplier, or what it is to like work with a factory, or what it's like to work with a showroom, or what a wholesale margin is, or, like those kinds of conversations are so important, and you can't have them with people who aren't living it or have lived it, I don't think. And I'm sure you'd probably agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important.
Do you have a lot of friends who are designers as well?
Yeah. I think it's important to have people around you, even just to know that you can call when something's going on.
Yeah.
I've always felt a bit of a disconnect being in Los Angeles, because while there is a fashion, maybe lowercase f fashion scene in Los Angeles, I really feel like many of my peers are in Paris or London, or you're in Madrid. Just Europe in general. And so that's really one of the reasons why I started this, is because I think it's really important for designers and in a larger part artists, to be talking to each other about our experiences. And
sure.
For me, because I didn't come from a fashion background, I like to think that, if I can, in a way doing this, I'm speaking to the 18-year-old Drew, who just would have loved to have something like this, but could never find it. I was 21 when I learned what Paris Fashion Week was, so I'm a bit, maybe some people would say that's kind of young to like learn about something, but I felt like I was a bit late to it, honestly, so.
I don't think so.
But I just have always been a student in that, I just want to be like learning as much as possible about the things that I'm interested in.
Right.
And so that's why I love this, right? Because you and I can be connected, and we can talk, and hopefully, we can bless some people out there that are on this same journey.
Totally. And I agree. I think even having said that, I have a lot of, through traditional study or whatever, a lot of my friends, just by the nature of the paths we all took, are in this industry. I'm also still always looking for these types of resources. I'm always looking to feel, like identified in a conversation, or feel seen, or, whether that's in long form interviews or going back into archives of interviews and reading. I've just had like a week of reading interviews with so many designers, but sort of back at their beginnings. And I found that really peaceful and like reassuring in some way, to listen to people talk about problems that I think we all still face, like 25 years down the track. I don't know if you feel this, but I think, like if you like have your eye on fashion press, it's always so like sensationalist on everything. It's like, the retail landscape, or like this is why it's failing, and this is everything is so like with an exclamation point. And I just start to realize that these problems have just been going for so long, and they haven't been solved, and people just manage to find their way through and keep going. And that kind of made me feel weirdly at peace last week for some reason.
How does being in Madrid, how does that make you feel as a part of the as a part of the next wave of designers coming up? Do you feel, is there a part of you that feels like you're a bit on the outside? Because there aren't, as far as I know, there's not a lot of designers that are based in Madrid.
No, there really isn't. I mean, designers that I suppose are in that same, I guess, world that we're in of, I don't know, certain stores or a certain positioning in the market of niche brands. No, there isn't. There's an industry here. I'm definitely not very much a part of it. But I don't feel disconnected. I feel connected, I think. I think it's good for me to be here. It's good that I feel good to be outside of a quote unquote capital of fashion or whatever, a London or New York or Milan or Paris. It feels good because I feel like I have space. I feel like I don't have, I feel like I drop in and out of what that, I mean, we have to go to, I'm sure like yourself, we go to Paris twice a year and you sell your collection. And if you present it in a way, that's what you do. Or if you don't, then, you're there for market or whatever. For me, that's enough. And other trips around and going back to London or whatever. And I think because a lot of my friends are there, I feel connected to it, but maybe I feel like I don't have to have it in my face or in my head all day, every day. So when I'm here, it's sort of slower. I feel like I've got a small little bubble in my studio, and I go home and I'm with my partner who has nothing to do with fashion whatsoever. And a lot of my friends who don't work in fashion at all, or, so it's a nice mix. And I wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest. It works. I think it's almost better for me and the way I am.
You feel like being in Madrid kind of gives you the mental space, really, and the physical space to be able to work on what you do.
Exactly. It just, it's literally exactly that. It's space. It's mental space. And I think if you live in Paris or in London, there's a lot of these, there's like a lot of these prizes. There's a lot of like initiatives. There's a lot of like incubators, and I see a lot of people and close friends get very trapped in this feeling of like, oh, I'm not getting this thing, or I'm not achieving this thing. And it's sort of very much in your day-to-day world, because it's the people you're having drinks with at a bar. It's like, and it's you can get really bogged down in comparing yourself. And I'm not saying that that's like, if you live in these places, that's going to happen. Everyone is in control of where they position themselves and where they give their time to and their energy. But I feel like being out of these places allows me just by default to not really focus on that at all, and focus on what I have to do. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been in Madrid now for how long?
How long? About 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you know Spanish really well?
Yeah, no, I speak Spanish. I mean, I did my undergraduate studies here as well. I've been here for, since I moved here in 2000 and not to Madrid. I lived in Barcelona for 3 years. I moved here in 2012. So, and my partner is Spanish, and we've been together for 13 years. So I've learned Spanish now. Yeah.
I'm curious if being bilingual affects the way that you view art. I mean, how does language play a role in how you view what you do?
It's weird because my team is Spanish, my factories are Spanish, everything is produced here, except for the shoes. And so all of my conversations, most of my conversations, just like day to day, are in Spanish. So except for sort of PR and the stylist that works with me since the beginning, we speak in English. But yeah, it's kind of hard when I take the collection away and I'm like, oh, we've given things names or we're referring to things in a certain way, and then I'm kind of thinking, oh God, like what is that in English, or what can I use? What words can I use to describe that in the same way that myself or someone from the team has described it throughout the process? But I mean, to be perfectly honest, it doesn't really. It's not a big deal. I think I can switch between the two quite easily now. So, but it is interesting.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like there are words that can describe something that, you really can't translate. And I feel like that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because the way you think about something may be like one word in Spanish or Greek or Latin. But it doesn't have a translation to English.
Yeah. And you can, and I feel like, funnily, I feel like to work with factories or to work with suppliers or whatever, the way my personality speaking in Spanish is better suited to that type of work than maybe in English. I don't know. Because I mean, Australians can kind of fall more closer to maybe the British side of English, which is, a lot of pleasantries and a lot of politeness, in inverted commas, and can almost be passive aggressive at times. I find the English language, it's hard to be direct with people without offending them. I don't know if you feel that way, but ever since learning another language, I'm realizing, okay, Spanish really allows you to have this directness with people, and it's not through anger or whatever. It's really just about being clear, and you can be aggressive, but it's not going to be taken in this affront to you. It's sort of just there's like a give and a take to that. So if an old person from a factory is starting to get angry with me, you can get angry back, but it's fine. It's not really something that's like, you're not going to end up on the floor punching each other or canceling anything. It's like, it is a passionate language, but yeah, I feel like it's almost like a performance. I can perform being someone who's, got it, who's assertive, when naturally I'm quite gentle. Most of the time.
the language allows you to kind of switch into a different way of being, I guess.
Exactly. It's a key. It's a key to like another dimension inside of your personality, weirdly. Which is why I find it fascinating. I wish I could speak more languages. Do you speak any other languages?
No, I'm trying to learn French, actually, just because I think that's probably one other place that I would end up. I love Los Angeles. I could stay here forever, I think, but because I'm there so often, I feel like it's kind of one of those tests for myself that I haven't quite accomplished, is learning another language.
Well, I would never have learned it had I not met someone or moved here. It was never, I was not, I think that's for me. I think there are people who can study and learn, and they're amazing. It's not me. I had to be like I was forced to learn.
Right.
So I'm grateful for that, but it's just the way the cards fell, I suppose, in my case.
Right.
Yeah.
When you were starting your business, what was the most difficult part for you?
I think the most difficult part in the very beginning was, I think the first showroom I did was hard for sure. I didn't have a showroom, like a representative for the first few seasons. I sort of started the brand. Well, I wouldn't even call it start the brand. Do you remember Opening Ceremony
Absolutely.
They bought like a selection of my graduate collection. So I didn't even really have a workspace at that time. I just took on the opportunity and decided to try this sort of small run of stuff and see how that felt. So that was sort of my first, I guess, commercial collection, which was almost a year after graduating. And then it was doing another collection shortly after and taking it to Paris, and trying to get people to come and look at it and pay attention to you. That was didn't feel like hard at the moment, but I think because you had a store, I was thinking, well, then if I already have a store, I'm sure other stores are going to come because they'll be interested because I'm already in a shop. And it was much slower than I thought it would be to get sort of grow in terms of stockists. And that's a hard thing to do, I think. And sort of set up, understanding really what it is actually costing you to make these things. What is it, what goes into a garment it's not just like a basic, it's like, fabric plus button equals times by whatever, and that's the price. It was sort of trying to learn a lot of things on the fly at the same time. And I think, when I took the first time I took a collection to Paris, that was big, that was difficult. It was tough.
And did you rent?
What about you?
Did you rent an Airbnb, or how did you find a showroom?
So a friend knew a friend of hers who had a small showroom with a bunch of American brands, actually. A bunch of American brands that were not at all connected to my work. There were women's wear. I don't know if you know a brand called Arax or Araxia. She does like women's lingerie, and it's beautiful, and she's amazing, and she's great. But it was just it was like contemporary women's wear brands, like really nice, but like contemporary price point. And I was the only menswear brand at that time in the space, because this woman just gave me she was like, look, like, just if you can pay for the rental of the rails, I've got an extra space. You're welcome to use it. So she gave me this huge favor, and so I could take my appointments with the stockists I already had, and then just basically DM and email as many other people as possible. So that's how I did that in the first kind of official season. The opening ceremony, the Masters collection, they emailed and wanted to see it and asked if I was having a showroom. And I said, I don't have a showroom, but I can come to Paris and show them. And I actually I was in London still. So I got my collection out of wherever it was at that point and literally put it in a garbage bag, and took a garbage bag over to Paris and went to their Airbnb and just took out these crumpled pieces from a garbage bag.
Yeah. That's the reality. We've all done that. I never did it with a garbage bag, but I definitely was.
Well, it was funny. It sounds like drama, but it wasn't me who put it in a garbage bag. Basically, my collection was in the One Granary showroom, like the press showroom, when they still did that back in the day, when they would take on like the graduating students, like some collections from the MA and BA class, and they would just try and get them in press, like in editorial or whatever. And I asked them to is someone going to Paris? Can they bring some stuff? And they'd put it into this, I don't want to say garbage bag. It was just a big plastic, kind of heavier duty plastic bag. So I had this bag.
It wasn't the like Balenciaga trash bag, the leather one?
No, it wasn't like a chic. No, it was literally a plastic bag. So that's just the way it transported. But it kind of made sense. That was what the collection was about, actually, anyway. So it felt conceptually completely right. Yeah.
I loved from that MA collection the way that you shot the photos almost as if it were being X-rayed.
Oh, yeah, the product shots. that was, yeah, I really wanted to like highlight the lightness of things. So light coming through them and then vacuum packing them and having them feel, just to show how thin it was, I think. Yeah.
I'm curious if Is there something about transparency or revealing that you're always kind of searching for in your work?
Definitely, that would be one thing I'm just naturally drawn to aesthetically. I think depth of layers, the piling on of lightness to create more lightness is interesting to me. How can, something that looks sort of, I don't know, yeah, it looks like there's so much material or there's so many processes involved, or yeah, just this sort of piling on of things. I think multiples of things I find interesting. And yeah, that would definitely be a theme. I don't know what else that could mean in terms of, transparency, but yeah, I think there's a sensuality that was very much the center of the focus in the beginning and has sort of evolved since, and there's sort of more things happening around that, but I come back to it just naturally through when you create things and you touch fabrics and you're looking at new fabrics, or you're thinking about a new category or a new piece or a new look you want to try and make. I think that's just naturally what I'm interested in. So until that's no longer interesting, I think it'll be there for me. I mean, interesting for me.
What's the importance of geometric shapes in your work? I mean, I noticed that you're always incorporating circles or squares or...
Yeah. I think they started through just like what I've just said about layering things or trying to create depth. In a small space, I think the body is like this, it's, when you really get down to it and you're looking at dressing people, you've got such a small amount of space to really make something look a certain way. And I think the first time we did this cutout thing, I just wanted to break up without having another garment or without having too many garments. I wanted to break up the space between here and below, and make it feel layered or something. And then we had this red shirt, and then I was like, well, let's put the red behind, and we discovered that we would wash these fabrics and they would dye the other fabric. The red circle inside like a lining shirt, when washed at a certain temperature, would dye the rest of it pink. And I found that really interesting. So, and it looked like these two lungs, like a window at work, sort of opened up into your insides, but in a very like naive way. It really was just about proportion. And I think it's just, for me, it's just a satisfying shape, not overcomplicating it. Squares and circles just, I think, are quite pleasing to me. And I think that's sort of something that happened naturally, and then you repeat it enough that maybe that's me trying to make it something that feels my own, even though I don't own any shape. But, you want to kind of create a through line, I suppose.
Absolutely. What is your approach to color? One of the things you do so beautifully is put colors together. I mean, how do you think about color? Are there certain colors that mean something to you in the way that you use them?
I wish I had a really poetic, beautiful answer for you, but no, I really don't have anything. It's pure instinct or what is catching your eye, or I try to spend very little time selecting colors to just so it doesn't become too... I don't like collections from myself, I mean, that feel like I've said, here's a color palette. Like you had to do it. Well, we had to do it at a university, you see a lot of mood boards that have a color palette, and like it's so clear and prescriptive. It's like, these are the 7 colors and you're going to see this work throughout the whole collection. And I wish I could work that way, but I just can't. And I'm always adding colors and taking them away. And the rail can end up looking like an absolute mess at various stages. No, I really just react to the color. But once we hone in on a color, I tend to be quite specific about what that color is. You know, if we're looking at fabrics that have 10 shades of red, you know, it's really about which one is going to make you feel, or me feel, like a certain energy from it. But it's very instinctual and not very labored at all. I just really like color.
Is red, would you say, your favorite color to work with?
No, I don't think it's my favorite. I think I enjoy adding it for sure. Because every time when I'm looking at a rail or I'm looking at the lineup of the collection, and I just feel the presence of red just often elevates a whole lot of other colors for me, even if it's just one piece and it's not involved in any other looks. But, you know, when you look at a collection like, you know, that, I just want to see these accents to, makes me feel like you see everything else in a different light.
And maybe this is just I'm connecting the dots between your, you know, the very first piece that you said you had a really strong connection with was that red sweater. But I notice red a lot in your collections. What's interesting about red too is that it's a very strong color, and in general, your silhouettes are very soft and fluid, and in a way that the red is kind of an imbalance, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think there is just a strength in, like you said, there's a real strength in the color. I think it's, I also feel like it's a color a lot of people are scared to wear. If you just talk with sort of just people in general, you know, these like rules that people have about what they're wearing and what they're, so I find it a really flattering color on a lot of people. I'm always excited if someone's wearing something red. I think it's like, I think it's super exciting. So I think that's probably why I'm adding it in subconsciously. I'll have to go through my seasons and check where it is. But I think you're right. It's probably in most of the collections.
Yeah. I went to Departamento a couple weeks ago, and I fell in love with this coat that you made. It's this red jacquard, kind of like, it reminded me of like a upholstery, almost like your grandma's couch.
It's a grandma couch for sure.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah, that fabric's crazy. That fabric was crazy. That was like a dead stock fabric that I couldn't, you know, on like a sourcing trip, I was there to source something else, and I was going through the rails of things, and I picked it up, and I was like, guys, look at how ugly this fabric is. That was my first reaction, because it was crazy. It was just so filled with weird, like almost looked like Illuminati, like writing or something. I don't know what is the symbolism on it. And then I kept doing the rounds of the space, and then picked it up again. And then I think I picked it up about 5 times. Then I was like, well, I've picked it up 5 times, guys. I think I have to buy it, or I need to get some meters of this. And this is going to be that. I just think this is going to elevate everything else if we have this texture. And we were thinking a lot about that season about interiors, and we just moved into a new studio, and I wanted something that felt really, like upholstery and deep and textured. And that coat is it sucks because we could only sell a certain amount because it was a dead stock, so we bought the whole stock, and it was sort of like until it runs out. And it was we did a pair of trousers as well, and I love those pieces. I wish I would have gotten one for myself, but there wasn't enough fabric.
Yeah, it was I was really struck by that piece in particular. And it was also, I had to check it was yours because it felt different from, you know, the work I had seen previously from you. When you're looking at fabrics, or you're thinking about your collection, what's your starting point really? Is it with the fabric itself, or is it with a particular idea?
It's probably fabric. Yeah, I think there are some fabrics that we always use. I think we always stick to these sort of lining type fabrics. There's always an element of the collection that's there. We always tend to have something solid as well, like a cold wool or a tailoring wool, whether we use that in a traditional way or not. I build it out from there. So I think in that season I was, really, really craving, as I mentioned, sort of a different texture or something more Baroque or more eccentric or more interesting, that something that felt like someone had sort of brought together a bunch of just a kind of a curation of things into their space, and it wasn't so prescriptive. And I wanted to kind of jolt the collection, give it, almost open a door to a new direction that we can take, and then the collection beyond that, we started using prints and flowers and kind of crazy ribbons and different bits and bobs. I just felt like I needed to open up for myself a space to explore another side of my own taste or fascination, or even challenge things that maybe traditionally I don't like. I don't think, a few years ago I wouldn't have liked a fabric like that. And often taking something that you really hate or dislike or don't, and trying to make it feel like it's part of your world is an interesting exercise.
And it's part of that paradox thing that we talked about earlier.
And taking a risk and thinking, this could open up a whole new, direction of things. It's just chapters, I suppose. It just feels, But I mean, as I mentioned to you, it is hard to do that when we're talking about consistency in a brand, because, do you do shows or do you do presentations, or how do you present?
It's really whatever the idea of the collection speaks to. So I
think I recall seeing your a bed presentation, which I thought was insanely beautiful.
Yeah, it really comes down to the whatever I feel like the idea of the collection is speaking to. And because I didn't grow up looking at fashion shows or, like style.com or whatever it was, my relationship with fashion was really how I felt about things and kind of the experience of that. And so, when I think about my work specifically, it doesn't always fit into the fashion context with how I want to present the idea. The idea may be something like the performance that I did, with the beds, where we pulled the pieces out of the beds and we hung them from the ceiling. And so we didn't use any models. We didn't have it showing from the body. It just was kind of hanging above the beds. And then I've also done my very first Paris Fashion Week presentation was with this giant wood cube that I built, and we wrapped string around the whole body. And just over the course of 2 hours, I was like cutting the string away with these mannequins inside that were only showing three silhouettes. And then I've also done more of a, catwalk situation. Not exactly like with just models walking by the audience, but it really just kind of depends what I'm thinking about, to be honest.
I think, and what's interesting is like a presentation or a show or whatever you do that isn't a lookbook, I suppose, allows a sense of like editing to take place, to kind of distill what the idea is through, like, you just, if you do 3 silhouettes or whatever. That's interesting because I've never done that. Basically every lookbook is a lookbook which is just styled every single piece that we're going to sell. So it's hard. I'm finding that I've had to lean into that as a collection idea, that there is like a rogueness to it, because you look at any big brand and their collections are, you'll see a 30 to 40 look, show. and think, wow, what a wonderfully coherent idea. But then you go to the showroom and it's like 400 SKUs of stuff. And in our brands of our size, I suppose, or, whatever, the size that isn't huge, you're like, I don't feel like I can do that. I don't feel like I can make a show collection and then have a sellable collection on the side. So it's sort of like whatever risk you take in the season, whether that's choosing a really, really weird fabric that doesn't feel on brand for you. I'm not doing that as a showpiece. I'm doing it to really actually try and sell it, and everything is available to be sold. So I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I think it's just sort of, I've been thinking about that a lot. I've been thinking about how nice it would feel to kind of latch on to maybe one or two ideas in a collection and expand that out into 25 looks and show it. But I don't feel like I have the space to do that. I feel like I'm trying to balance newness, sell through, carry over, what people need, what clients need, and what I want to give them all the time into this one very small collection. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah.
But it's tricky.
And to me, and that's why I show each collection so differently, is because it's supposed to serve the idea. I think that's the most important part, how you show it. But also, I think the experience, what's important about fashion to me is the experience with something and with others, as opposed to, this one piece that I have to have, or something. Right. Because I didn't, I've never really owned any fashion pieces. I could never really afford it. And when I went out on my own, I've really just been making my own things. So I have this different relationship with fashion, capital F fashion in general. And, I really want it to be an experience. And I think that experience is an important piece. When I was in London a few years ago, I went to a show by an art show by Antony Gormley at the Royal Academy there. And this art show was amazing because I don't know if you're familiar with Antony's work, but he does these really large, I think it's casted bronze, sculptures. Yeah. And he had one room where he flooded the whole room, so you could only view it from the outside, but I believe it was water that he took from a river or a lake or something, so that you could see fish and dirt and algae and all this stuff. And what I realized, what was important to me about going to that art show, and this was right before I did my first collection for iRay, is I realized that the thing that I love specifically about art or creation is this experience-based idea, and so the fact that with Antony Gormley's work, you could walk in it and through it and around it and interact with it, as opposed to it being something that's just kind of hanging on the wall that you look at. And so I really kind of took that. I never had recognized that about myself and about the artwork that I liked. And so, within fashion specifically, that's something that I wanted to take some notes from, I guess.
That's so important then, I suppose. And that you do those presentations. I think most fashion can benefit from it in a way. I know it's just a whole other dimension. It just adds a whole other dimension to it. And in my own case, we haven't done that yet. We haven't added that dimension for various reasons. But I think you're right. I think it really brings people I suppose, in a way that, yeah, it's hard to with a flat image of what you're making. But I do find that limitation interesting as well. I try to find ways that we can create texture or invite people into a world, however literal or not that is, through imagery. Photographing it in places that you might not have, traditionally you might not want to show, or whatever can be interesting. But yeah, I think the experiences of fashion, with a capital F, in like a performative way, in like a space or a presentation, there's nothing quite like it. Or even in shops, I feel like, like Bodhi or a brand like that has created that kind of feeling by doing their own spaces, or a younger brand, which obviously very established, but they've created a space that you can go in and feel like you're living it in the whole sense of the word, interiors, the smell, or whatever. So that's kind of amazing that you chose to do that from the beginning.
But I think in some ways you've done that as well, in the ways that you shoot your lookbook. I know you did one, I believe it was one of the earlier ones, where you kind of cut and pasted a notebook almost, and you scanned that notebook in. But then you also did something I saw where it looks like you printed out images on, maybe it was newspaper, but you printed a large image onto multiple newspapers that you kind of like put together like tile.
The quarantine editorial.
I mean,
quarantine editorial.
I think those are ways that, that's a presentation in and of itself, I think, because paper is something you feel and can interact with.
Totally. And that was exactly why I did that, I think, because we tried to do this. We were going to do this special for another magazine, and then everyone went into lockdown. So, but then suddenly the casting director was like, well, we can get all these really great boys because everyone's just at home. And we're like, great, well, then let's just do it on Zoom, and get them in their bedrooms or in their living spaces and take photos. And then we kind of took all this content of like 9 boys, and I was like, well, this just looks like screenshots, and I just don't know how to make this feel more tactile. And then I just started printing stuff out and trying to look at a big scale or whatever. And, tried to like make them bigger than myself almost. And that ended up quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, once you can take it into the real world, I think that's when a whole other dimension opens up. It just sucks that it's only really communicated to a small group of people. I don't know if you feel that way. You can't expect that thousands of people could come to a show, or at least on the budgets that I would have.
Yeah. And that's why it was important for me to have these other ways of expressing the idea where, of course we invited press and other people that you would invite to a runway show.
Oh yeah.
But we also, we made it open. I mean, I did, my first presentation was open to the public and everybody could come. And there's always been that aspect to the way I show my work, because I could have never gotten an invite, to a fashion show, before I was doing this. And so I'll have students email me, people that are just in Paris, who want to come to the presentation or the show, and we have a space for them, like whether it's a standing space like on the side, or whether it's, the whole idea of the presentation was to have it open.
Yeah.
That's a really important part about how I show it.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's great. I mean, there's the people who are, honestly, of course, as you said, buyers and press are other, necessary. It's like you have to share it with the industry, but it's nice to for anyone who's connecting to what you're doing, to be able to come and experience it in that way sounds like a dream.
How
for sure.
How do you approach menswear versus women's wear? And what do you do differently when you're working with those bodies?
Women's wear is sort of something that's been creeping through the last 2 years, maybe 2.5, and now feels like as every season becomes more balanced out in terms of like the offering, I suppose. Women's wear is I really approach them very differently, but simultaneously. I don't sort of sit down and go, okay, women's and men's, 2 weeks on women's, 2 weeks on men's. I think often men's ideas, well, now actually more often than not, women's ideas translate back into men's ideas for me. We'll do something and we're thinking it's women's, and then we'll, try and translate that into something that feels men's. I mean, in the beginning, it felt like it was more of an androgynous sort of a non-gendered thing, because a lot of the men's suits were being bought by women, as was the feedback I got from a lot of stores, that a lot of more women were sort of buying into the collection than men were. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So for a long time, I didn't really distinctively change anything. I was just offering men's blocks and maybe expanding the size range so more different body types could use it. Now I definitely do women's and use women's blocks and do dresses and do skirts and do shirts and even tailored trousers that are just women's. I think because, I just started seeing both. I really wanted to see both together. I wanted to see a man and a woman, or man identifying a woman identifying person wearing those clothes and feeling, feminine or masculine. Or I think the clothes challenge more what masculinity could feel like or look like than maybe the women's clothes do. But I think because I'm just naturally, I'm drawn to femininity. I'm drawn to women in my life, and most of my friends are women, and I think I just felt like I wanted to start dressing that idea or that feeling. But the approach is very similar. It's really, I don't even know where it begins, but we just build up blocks, I suppose. We build up, okay, what kind of trouser do we feel? The stylist I work with, Patricia Villarillo, she's been working with me since the beginning of the brand. And, it's her opinion, I think, because it was all men's in the beginning. And she's been a really big support and encouragement to start doing more women's wear. And she goes, what if you did this? Or, I'm missing this in my wardrobe. Or I've seen this piece and I just wish, I could have what you've just done, but it was more like this. And I thought, well, let's start developing things for that person who's basically her. And that's kind of how it's happened.
How has your collaborations come about, between, you have Dentro doing bags together and Adam working on footwear, but also, with your stylists. I mean, what's important about those relationships to you?
They're so important. I mean, the Dentro bag thing was sort of a one-season thing, but Isa, who's the founder of that brand, she's a dear friend, and I was introduced to her through one of my best friends from school, from university. And I think, when you just connect with someone and their language or and there's an opportunity to do something together, and then you feel like it might work, or it might, as I spoke about before, open up a new door into a new thing for you. It was a no-brainer. And then, of course, Patty, the stylist, that is something since before the brand even had conceived, before the brand had even been sort of, I'd even thought that it was a brand. We did a project together just for Pilot magazine, which is a magazine she used to run in London, shortly after I finished university. And I just loved those few days working together. And we both did. And I think we both just really connected with each other. And so it just felt like a no-brainer that she needed to be involved. So she flies here every single season to do the styling, and it's an ongoing thing. And we'll do most projects together. And it's really important for me. I need that consistency. I think it's super important to have a consistent conversation with people who understand where you're going, but also can challenge you to move in a way. I mean, I often try not to put looks together at all before she's here. I try to I have in my mind ideas about what could be looks, but I love to give the freedom, the 100% freedom for her to just completely fuck with the collection and get it, move everything around, move it all around into what I thought it was going to look like. And often I'm way happier than I was going to be in the beginning. And actually, Adam is one of her dear friends from when they were growing up. And he's a contemporary dancer. He's not even sort of in the industry, I guess, in like that way. But his passion is shoemaking. And he has a very small operation in Reggio Emilia, in like the north of Italy. And she put us in contact. She goes, I just see something in his work that I think you're going to connect to. And we did. And he's such a generous guy, and he's beautiful to work with. And he's so excited to work because it's sort of like a break for him. He's in a full-time, very, very good company in Italy as a dancer for the last, I think I want to say 10, 15 years. He's been in this company. So shoemaking for him is like a release. So yeah, they all felt like really organic things that have happened, and I treasure them a lot because it's what makes working enjoyable at the end of the day, is collaborating with people and seeing something grow together.
What have you learned about your creative process, working on bags and shoes, coming from a mostly, cut and sew garment background?
I think they're the perfect places to distill, if that's the right word, an idea. It's sort of like, how can we concentrate something that's often, I spoke earlier of the space on the body, to kind of communicate an idea, and how many garments really are there, and how many opportunities do you have in a look or in a collection to like explore an idea. And I find it even more extreme in shoes they're not meant to have everything in the one place, but I found it like, God, this needs to feel identifiably us. It needs to feel like the most pure, concentration of like what we're saying. So, with Adam's work, it felt like the way he dealt with seaming or the aging of the boots, which is really manual and really laborious, felt like something that I felt seen and represented in. And then with the bags, it's an ongoing journey. We're getting there. We've launched our own leather bags. But that's how I feel. I think it's a whole new world for me with the bags and accessories. I think it's something that we're just slowly building into the collection, because it's like a whole other industry, which is why I want it to still feel small and niche enough, and keep it inside what is actually we're capable of doing. I can't go to a factory and start producing hundreds of bags and hundreds of shoes. So it's nice to be doing it in this like collaborative way.
Yeah. And I love the handmade essence you've been able to capture with your collaborators, and kind of that rawness.
Yeah, I think that's just been organically part of their work as well. Like I think it's just when amplified by my work together, it just was a good fit, because I think it's a type of language that a lot of people share and want to have in their lives, like your own brand. I connect to your brand through that. Through other ways as well, but through an appreciation for something, for the undoneness of it all. is something I'm always going to find refreshing, I think.
Who was your first fashion hero when you look back? Was there a designer or a brand you really connected with?
Oh God, that's a toughie, isn't it? I don't really know. I mean, maybe that brand is maybe that denim brand that I spoke about when I was a kid, Subi. They felt just like the coolest people on planet Earth to me at that time. But I wouldn't say. I think in terms of fashion, I think I think a lot of people was really looking at people like John Galliano, when I was a child, or Nicolas Ghesquière, the classic designers in France that I was just obsessed with looking at. But I'm not such an obsessive person. I don't think I've ever really fanboyed over much. Not through disinterest, just through. It's just not who I am. So I think I've liked a lot of people, but rarely does something make me become obsessive about it in a way. I don't know what that says about me.
Do you feel like you end up looking at other art forms for inspiration more than fashion?
I definitely look at a lot of art and I look at a lot of design. Whether or not it's for inspiration, I do a lot of very freestyle research. I think I'm often, when I'm blocked, I'll just research and collect imagery. I don't often know what it's for or why, but I'll just collect it. So I know that when I'm feeling stuck or when I'm bored or when I don't feel like doing what I should be doing, which is, writing on Excel or doing invoices or accounting, I'll go and do that. And that can often jog my memory or jog something inside of me to create something else. I look at a lot of different things. I really do. And I watch television. I watch TV shows. I do a lot of work, watch a lot of sort of current culture and absorb that as well, and find that interesting. And I guess it always feeds in somewhere, whether or not I'm recognizing it now. You can look back and think, oh, maybe that was from there or whatever. But I do look at a lot of fashion. I do like fashion with a capital F. I have to say, I do like it. I really do like the medium, as crazy as it can be sometimes. So I do look at a lot of fashion as well, for sure.
What's been inspiring you recently?
What's been inspiring me recently? I've been looking a lot since last year at interior fabrics. Actually, that's probably something that's been more apparent in my research recently. Different printing techniques. I think I'm really becoming more interested in understanding print and things like Devore or processes that can be used to create really opulent looking textures. That's been inspiring me. It's not coming through my work yet, but I can feel that that's maybe where it's heading, because I'm finding that more stimulating than a lot of other things personally. But yeah, that's probably one example.
It takes time for things sometimes, to sit with us before we incorporate it.
Absolutely. It takes a long time for me. I think it's hard often when you discover things, you're too far down the process of whatever you're working on to kind of include it unless it's something really accessible. So you often have to keep things. I have a folder that's back burner ideas or whatever, and I'm thinking, okay, we'll get to that. And how I don't know what your development process is like, but just certain things like textiles, you've got to have so much foresight to be able to even do them. which is what I'm realizing now as the collection grows. Usually it's just us working with whatever we have available, and coming up with things. But I'm starting to really push to want to have, I wanted to do embroidery this season. I think we wanted to do sequin embroidery and specialist embroidery on things. And it's just, I haven't been able to get it together because we can't get the things to India or to wherever in time to bring them back. And I just looked at the calendar and I was like, well, okay, that has to just be on hold for a while because I can't physically get it done in time. It's when you don't have like a powerhouse of resources behind you, it's complicated. But that's also half the fun, I think, to not have endless resources and to just deal with what you have and show up every season and hope that people still like you.
That's really where creativity happens, is on the edges of the box that you're exploring.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What's one belief you have now that you didn't have when you started on your fashion journey?
One belief I have now, I would say, I think if you create something, there will be someone who does connect to it and want to consume it or wear it or be a part of it. I don't think I thought that when I was younger. I think I thought, oh, no, you have to be that for people to want to be a part of that or buy it or spend money on you. And you're not going to be able to do that without this, and this, and this, and this, and this. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know how to phrase it in the right way, but I think I've learned that just when you create or when you make something, honestly, in an honest way, I suppose, or in a truthful to yourself, genuine, non-contrived way, you might connect to a lot of people or you might connect to a few, but there is always someone who will connect to it. And that's something I really, truly believe that anyone, no matter where they come from in terms of education or background or CV or experience, if they're making something that is an honest thing, it will translate. I really believe that.